Welcome back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It is baseball season everywhere but here. It is the off season and the dark season for Baltimore Orioles fans, but this guy's got a book. He's one of our dear friends. He's always been a friend to WNST, and I've gotten to know him over the years and actually had an adult libation in his hometown of Portland, Oregon with him. Powerball is the new book. I am holding it up on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. You can find it, The Anatomy of a Modern Baseball Game. It is always a pleasure to have Rob Neyer on the program. Rob, what an ugly cover for your book, dude. I mean, the outfield of Mount Davis and the dawn of Moneyball and statistics. It's wonderful that all this was built in a place that's thought of as not a baseball stadium at all, right?
It's true. And I write about that in the book a little bit, as you probably know. It is odd that the A's play where they do. They should, by all rights, play in a postmodern ballpark with lovely views of the Oakland Hills, but it just hasn't worked out that way yet.
They probably should have played in Denver in 1982, right? I mean, that almost happened a million times. Look, we're not here to talk about the A's, and you've written this book, and people look to you as an analytics leader, and some of it's far beyond my pay grade, and I know you're running a baseball league these days. You've written a bunch of books. You get paid to write books, but not nearly enough. Tell me about the book itself, because we can get into baseball playoffs and all the Oriole nonsense, and you come on all the time, but I really want to give you a platform to talk about the book because it's in my hands. I'm going to be fingering through it as well, and sometimes as an old-school baseball guy, and I know the value of wins, and I know the value of RBIs, and I understand analytics, sometimes it can be a little thick for a guy like me that just wants to enjoy a ball game, you know?
Well, I think that one of the perpetual beauties of baseball is that it can be enjoyed in so many different ways. Now, I will temper that by saying one of my biggest problem with today's game is that those ways are dwindling. There were, just to name the most obvious example, there were more strikeouts than hits in 2018. And to me, that's a trend that we don't want to see continue. The game is becoming more and more two-dimensional every year, home runs and strikeouts. And that's where the title of the book comes from, Powerball. It's all about the power pitching and the power hitting. And those are wonderful things to watch. They've always been a big part of the game, going back to Babe Ruth and Lefty Grove and Bob Feller and Ted Williams, and the list goes on and on. But we don't want it to be the whole game, just a part of the game. Having said that, there's still a great number of pleasures in baseball. There's still a lot of different ways to win, and there's still a great deal that is unpredictable. Just yesterday, for example, in the inning that devastated the Indians' chances to win Game 3 against the Astros, their pitchers, in the game, their pitchers, the Indians' pitchers made 3 errors. They made 3 errors all season. So you can't predict that. I don't care how good your analysts are. I don't care how much money you spend on a supercomputer. You just can't predict that sort of thing. So that's not going away. What's also not going away, though, is this trend to get more and more information in the front office and to share as much of that with the players as they can handle. And some players love it, and some players don't. And one of the big jobs that front offices have nowadays and coaching staffs have is figuring out what the players want and getting it to them when they want it.
I had lunch with a pretty high-level guy who was managing the major leagues. I keep his name out of it because, I'm a source guy, Rob. And I had a really long lunch with a guy who'd been in the game for 35 years, sort of a little older than me, friend of a friend, and we had like a real heart-to-heart. And he's on a major league staff right now, and he said to me that his job has changed so dramatically over the last 15 years. about analytics, what time he has to get to the ballpark. His job used to be very physical, out with his eyes and his ears and hands-on with players. Now it's all about pouring through data, looking for a pitching edge in the seventh inning with left-handers, with the wind in the right direction and the field being the right way and the other team's bench, that the analytics have overtaken his job. And he said, it's good that I'm equipped for this, but there are a lot of old white guys in baseball that aren't equipped for that. And we're seeing the Orioles about to go through a transition as to whether they're going to be run by the old guard, Buck Showalter, Dan Duquette, and they're gone now, or whether they're going to bring some nerds in from MIT and Cal Davis and the Houston Astros to run the place and run it in that fashion, because that's where it's at right now. And as much as you have this awful baseball field, and by the way, I don't hate the Oakland Stadium. I actually love it for baseball for a lot of reasons, and Charlie Finley and all that stuff. But one of the reasons that they had to adapt was they were never going to have the money that the Yankees or the Red Sox or any of the Cardinals, any of those teams are going to have, that they had to do it a different way. So I guess that's what begets every invention there's ever been, right? I mean, necessity is the mother of invention, right? The A's needed to adapt because adapting wasn't, we're going to make money on Sky Suites and our stadium and our media and all of that. We need to find a better way to find baseball players.
It is true, and I think by this point, most of the people who are listening and watching right now read Moneyball or saw the movie, even more saw the movie.
Or at least the Cliff Notes.
And that's right. And that is the storyline. You know, it is also worth mentioning, which wasn't in the book or the movie really, that the foundation of the A's success was smart drafting. They don't win all those games in the early 2000s in the Moneyball era if they don't draft Tim Hudson and Barry Zito and Mark Mulder. It doesn't happen. And you know what? There's still a place for that sort of thing. Absolutely. Now, does analytics inform everything that, say, the Astros do or the A's do today still? Absolutely. But I think that it's funny because you can find stories, you've been able to find stories since Moneyball, the book came out, I think, saying that this is the death knell for scouts. Well, guess what? There are more scouts employed by major league teams right now than there have ever been. And the reason is because it isn't that these teams crave statistics. They do. But it's bigger than that. What they crave is information. And there is nothing more valuable than an outstanding scout, because what he tells you, while it might not be statistically based, it is information. And it's information, again, if it's a great scout, it's information you can trust. And there's nothing more valuable than that. So I don't see scouting going away. I don't see the old school stuff going away. Yes, different teams are going to focus on different things to different degrees, but all of that stuff is still alive and well.
He is Rob Neyer. The book is Powerball, Anatomy of a Modern Baseball Game. And, Rob, you know how much I love baseball and you know, running around on tours and whatnot. You and I have been talking for the better part of 2 decades about our love of baseball, and we'll get to the Orioles and all that. But I ran a bus trip out to Ray Lewis in early August, out to Canton, Ohio for the weekend, and the Sunday trip back was literally through Pittsburgh. You have to go through Pittsburgh to get home. And the Pirates were playing a 105 game against the St. Louis Cardinals, and you know, I had everyone on my group. I bought 150 tickets, and on Saturday I heard everybody bitching about having to stop in Pittsburgh to go to a baseball game. And I sent 2 of the buses straight home. No stop. And these were people, 75 people that had paid for the ticket to go to the game. They literally were going to get dropped off, and it was a glorious day, Rob. You know, it was 74 degrees, powder clouds in the sky. The regatta was going on in Pittsburgh, and we had door-to-door service. And I said, we're not going to stay for the whole game. We're going to push the bus 3:15, 3:30 so as to not have post-game traffic. Turns out there were like 9,000 people there that day. There was no post-game traffic. The regatta wasn't even all that well attended on the other side of the river. But I found it shocking. And then I got up in the upper deck, and I had my 75 people, and we all had a Permani or a hot dog or whatnot, icy light, and watching the Pirates and Yins and that. And I looked down at the field from right field, And there was never a time in the 7 innings where it looked like a baseball diamond to me. The shortstop's playing out in right field, the center fielder's playing in right field, the left fielder's playing in center. It kind of reminded when we played, pitcher's handout, where we would only play the right side of the field because everybody pulled the ball, or left side of the field because everybody pulled the ball. And if a left-handed batter came up, we all had to move to the right side of the field. I don't recognize it physically as much, and I haven't sat at as many games, but it's dramatic what's happened to baseball, and it's dramatic for an old school guy like me to say, do I still like this? Is this still interesting to me?
I think it's a fair question to ask, especially for people like us who have been fans since the 1970s, in my case, or 80s. It is dramatically different in some obvious ways. And again, I get back to the strikeouts and the home runs. So much more now. So many fewer batted balls. One of the things that that we miss is, I think we would miss Ozzie Smith now to some degree. We wouldn't even see him because he would be on a field with literally 20% fewer batted balls in play because of all the strikeouts and home runs.
It reminds me, Rob, I always equate it to tennis. When the rackets got so powerful for the men, everything was an ace, and volleying went away, and people went to the women's game. And I don't know that they've ever really come back to the men's game from an interesting. It's not interesting.
Right.
Women's tennis is more interesting. Some would say that women's basketball, if you took your bias out of it, is a much more interesting game being played below the net than the way the NBA game has been played. So, there is the evolution of all of these games in the same way there's the evolution of stock car racing and professional wrestling and football, which many people say isn't as good because it's not as violent, right? But baseball, to me, I think it's been overthought to the point of almost boredom now, that it's become so much more difficult to watch. I mean, even watching this week, I said to my wife, boy, it moves slow. I mean, it really does. I was watching the Dodgers-Braves the other night, and I'm like, man, just pitch the ball, dude. Somebody throw the ball. Put the ball in play. Somebody steal a base. Somebody lay down a bunt. Somebody do something interesting.
We want to see more baseball things happening in a baseball game. I think it really comes down to that. And I would argue with the notion that the game is overthought. I think it's always been thought about a great deal. Go back to John McGraw, or even with the Giants, or even John McGraw when he was with the Orioles in the 19th century. For God's sake, he thought day and night. He thought about the game. It's not really the issue. Isn't that they're thinking about the game too much? The issue is that that baseball itself, and by that I mean Major League Baseball and these days the Players Association, they've let the game on the field get away from them. They haven't taken the steps that you should take to make sure that you preserve the things that make the game what it was and what it could be.
It's real simple. The shortstop can't move the other side of second base, and the second base, there are things you could do to say we have to play the game a normal way to give Chris Davis a chance to play.
There are many things you could do, but you know what? I would start with the pitcher-batter confrontation before the batter-fielder confrontation. When you have guys throwing 100 miles an hour routinely, almost these days, coming out of the bullpen for an inning at a time, when you have starting pitchers who are only expected to go 6 innings, or actually, as you've seen this season, pitchers starting a game and expected to go 1 or 2 innings, you're going to wind up with a lot of strikeouts. And until baseball does something to address the parade of pitchers who throw mid-90s and higher, it's going to be strikeouts and homers. There's no way around that. So I think that's where it has to start. And frankly, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to change until the players, especially, feel that the modern game, or what I call in the book the postmodern game, is taking money out of their pockets. Until that happens, they're going to resist every significant change.
He is Rob Neyer. The book is Powerball, the anatomy of a modern baseball game. All right, go get the book. It's awesome, good. We got a lot of problems here, Rob. I'm here to talk about the Astros and the Brewers and all these wonderful stories, and you and I don't have time to do that. But the Orioles, this is. I don't know what to say. So I haven't talked to you in 3 months because, quite frankly, nobody's watched baseball around here in 3 months. But I think they are watching this, and I think the eyes of Major League Baseball are watching this, where, Ken Rosenthal is reporting that, the people in New York don't even know who to call in Baltimore to get an answer on things. The mass and money, the learners are tied up in this. Bryce Harper and Manny Machado and their exits tied up in all of this money. We got a hell of a mess on our hands here, and I'm living in the middle of it, and it's going to take some special human beings not named Angelos to fix this in our community, Rob.
I couldn't agree with you more. I go back to, I think it was 2002 or 2003, and this is probably after the Orioles went 67-95 in 2002, somewhere right around in that period. And I spoke to someone pretty high up at Major League Baseball about the situation in Baltimore, and I said, "What do you do about this? How does this ever change?" And this person said, and frankly, I know it sounds sort of morose or macabre, but he said, referencing Peter Angelos, he said, "Nobody lives forever." Well, that was 16 years ago, and here we are. And in that time, as you well know, the Orioles had that little spurt of success, 2012 to 2014, when they won a ton of games and went to the playoffs twice. And
which I look at as a miracle. To me, the fact that Buck Showalter took this job, we're all patting him on the back on the way out the door. There was no one who thought he was sane for taking this job, literally.
And to go to the playoffs 3 times in 5 years was pretty amazing, considering the organizational issues. And it isn't just that he did a miraculous job. One of those playoff years, they outscored their opponents by 7 runs. In another of those seasons, they outscored their opponents by 29 runs. Those are not typically playoff numbers. It just happened. So, if you want to, I'm not saying that those don't count, because of course they do count. But for 3 playoff seasons in the last, 21 seasons, that's not good, obviously. And I think that you have to attribute all of this to ownership. And I think you're absolutely right that until there's a change at the top, this team is not going to be competitive year in, year out, if at all. And that's a rough place to be, I think, as a fan. Because you don't want to sit around waiting for your owner to die. That's no fun for anybody, and it's also kind of mean. But if I'm a fan, I'm not sure what else to think.
I would say he was mean to me first. You know what I mean? When people ask me how he felt about me and how I'm going to feel the day he dies, and I'm saying I'm going to write the same thing I've been writing for 20 years because I've been writing the truth. And, it is what it is, and there's many times I've said, it'll change when he dies, and now it's that purgatory area. That the incredible part of this, Rob, the big 50,000-foot picture is that they allowed Dan Duquette to pretend he was running the place, and all of their assets were dealt off. The Machados and the Gosmans and the Scopes were dealt off before the next person takes over,
right.
And this is what you were delivered at the time. And much like Sid Thrift, we could talk about Melvin Mora being in the Sid Thrift deals, but there's nothing else to talk about from all of those deals that summer. It'll be 3-4 years before any of this sticks to anybody, but it's still going to stick to Oriole baseball. And the real worry I have here, and I talked a lot about this with a lot of your pals at the All-Star game, was I went down to D.C. and saw that thing, saw the cranes in the sky, and I drove past there seeing Lenny Kravitz down at the Anthem 2 weeks ago as well. The Nationals are a real thing. For 25 years, I always heard, Washington can't support no baseball. They couldn't support the Senators twice. I heard all of that Baltimore-ese, and now I see it and say, they're going to be the Yankees. They're going to be the Red Sox. They're going to be the franchise with all the money moving forward, and Baltimore is going to be some outhouse Oakland A's because of the way it's been run. And once this mass and money is no longer being siphoned out of the pockets of the people here, as it's been for over a dozen years now, the Orioles are going to have to fly on their own under the new owners, and it's really going to take some special people to sort of resurrect this dead patient.
I think that you're exactly right, and it can happen, but you have to get the right people in place. You look at what the Astros have done. Jeff Luhnow is arguably one of the smartest people who's ever run a baseball team. Actually, I don't even think it's arguable. I think he's top 5, top 10 all time. And they had to lose a lot of games, or at least that's the story that's told, and I think it's probably true. They had to lose a lot of games to get where they are, but now they're probably the best organization in baseball. I would say it's them or the Dodgers, top to bottom. So you can get there, but you're right. You have to have special people in place. And you probably don't get there by hiring somebody nobody's ever heard of or who hasn't been in baseball. The Dodgers got there by hiring the person who built the Rays. The Astros got there by hiring the person who helped build the Cardinals or rebuild them or rebuild their talent base with some tremendous drafts based on analytics. So I'm not sure how else you make that transition from losing 100-plus games to winning 100-plus. But it can be done, but you got to have the right people.
Well, I remember back when John Angelos was picking Sid Fernandez and Chris Sabo, in free agency when Daddy bought the team, and now the kids are in charge of this thing, and it's very, very clear you need an analytics nerd, but it's also clear this is not a good situation from a building standpoint to hang your hat and come to Baltimore. And for Showalter and Duquette on the way out the door, they've left the cupboard pretty barren from what I can tell.
Well, that's exactly right. And when it's always worth remembering that when Jeff Luhnow took over in Houston, they already had Jose Altuve and Dallas Keuchel and George Springer in the organization, some tremendous talent, and they wouldn't have done what they've done without those guys who were already there. Now, no team is bereft of talent. The trick is identifying it and maybe developing a bit more. So if you have the right ownership, you can attract top front office talent. You can say, look, I know it looks bare, but there are these 6 guys who all have a chance to be good major leaguers, and we will give you free rein to do what you think needs to be done. But that's what you've got to do. You're not going to attract a Jeff Luhnow or a Theo Epstein or somebody to your organization unless you can give them the keys and say, here are the dollars you have to spend. Now do what you want to do. That's what you just can't get those guys unless you give them that freedom. And I don't think the Orioles are going to give that to anyone given their current ownership.
He's Rob Neyer. The book is Powerball, Anatomy of a Modern Baseball Game. Rob, I'll bring you back on after the World Series, and we'll all congratulate whomever it is that wins. And it's certainly been a good baseball season in these cities where we're watching them play right now. I would say the one thing about postseason baseball is just how much different it is than the regular season in regard to relief pitching, in regard to matchups, and micro, macro sort of, big picture where I have to worry about what's going on next week and, oh, my God, we're in a knockout game and I got to win today or the season dies. Seeing that, October has really changed dramatically in recent times, and we go back to Buck Showalter leaving Zach Britton out there, or the Orioles getting swept by the Royals because of the Royals bullpen, making it a 5 or 6 inning game. That is where it is right now, and the teams that have bullpens are going to be the ones that wind up playing 3 weeks from now for the World Series, right?
Well, bullpens that include really good starting pitchers. Remember Charlie Morton in the World Series last year?
Sure.
They've got these pitching staffs. Not only do you have 4 or 5 relief pitchers probably who throw mid-90s at least, but you've also got a starting pitcher or 2 with tremendous stuff who can come in and instead of asking him for 6 innings when he's really good, ask him for 2 or 3 or 4 innings when he's tremendous. And so absolutely, we have no idea now. Trevor Bauer with the Indians coming in as a reliever twice. We have no idea at this point who's going to start, or especially who's going to relieve. And so it does change the equation quite a bit. And you've also got, by the way, with all of the analytics, you can now hyper-prepare for your opponents. And I know the Indians were grumbling just yesterday, suggesting that they weren't as well prepared for the Astros as the Astros were for them. And that wouldn't surprise me because the Astros have dozens of people whose job it is to as we talked about earlier, to find the numbers that can help their players thrive. So that's a big part of it. So you're right, October baseball, it's different than, it wasn't that long ago that your A starting pitcher might start 3 games and pitch 27 innings or something, or at least 24. if he was pitching well. That's not going to happen anymore. There are a few horses out there, Justin Verlander, there are a few guys. But for the most part, it's let's get this guy in. I don't care how good he is for 5 or 6 innings, and then go to the bullpen.
Rob Neyer, a baseball insider, and you're running a league. You want to talk about the West Coast League real quick and just give a little plug out for that?
Oh, sure. It's the West Coast League it's the premier collegiate summer league, sort of the equivalent of the famous Cape Cod League out here, basically west of the Mississippi River. With teams ranging from up in British Columbia down to Bend and Corvallis in Oregon, and it's a lot of fun. I got to go to every ballpark this summer, some of which are just in the most beautiful settings with the mountains in the background and all that. And I'm looking forward to my second season next year.
Rob Neyer can be followed out on Twitter as well as a writer of writings, and he always keeps the books secret until they come out, but the secret is out. It's Powerball. If you're a baseball fan, you'll dig it. You can find him out on Twitter as well. You can find me in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be, anytime, anywhere. We are very available. The morning newspaper is also there at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. $5 down, $10 a month. You know the deal. It's right in the neighborhood. It is Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Also, the Maryland Jockey Club and the Maryland Million being held on October 20th down at Laurel's. We hope to see you down there for the Maryland Million. Learn more at the front of WNST.net under the Laurel tab. We put the entries in every day, as well as in our morning newspaper. Breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford at Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday doing the SSV on WNST. That's 3 until 5. I will be a part of that as we get ready for my 50th birthday in Nashville, Tennessee this weekend, where I hope the Ravens play better than they played in Cleveland, Ohio. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.